Hello, everybody. Welcome to a new chapter in the life of County Seat. It's called County Seat Underground. Each week, we will have team members that will bring you the long conversations that we don't have time for, and we don't have, well, they're a little less polite than those conversations that you see on ABC4. So our theme, our motto, with the County Seat Underground is that it's going to be unabashed, unfiltered, and definitely politically incorrect. So who does that define for you? Well, immediately what comes to mind to me is Darren Bushman, Commissioner of Paiute County. And he's going to join us as one of our team captains here on County Seat Underground. Darren, how are you tonight?
I'm fantastic, Chad, and I'm going to take that as a compliment to the fullest extent, because unabashed and irreverent. That's me. I got it whooped.
Also, I should have said something about dad jokes.
Yeah, dad jokes.
Because Rhea definitely wanted me to talk to you about dad jokes.
Yeah,
because you are the king dad of dad.
Yeah, I might have one or two of those. Yes. So
how long do you either have a source that you're not telling us about, or you spend copious amounts of time trying to come up with these lines, unless you just kind of think like that?
Well, I'd hate to admit that I think like that, Chad, but there is that possibility, right? So I actually have lots of sources. I don't usually plagiarize directly, though. So you'll notice that most of my dad jokes I try to personalize in some fashion. So
yes, that's true. And how does Carrie respond to all of the abuse she takes?
Yeah. So Carrie, she just goes along with it, and then she gets lots of sympathy from her friends, which she likes. So that works out pretty well for her. And it's my kids that don't usually appreciate it all that much.
Yeah, well, kids are like that, and your job is to harass them.
That's my theory on it, right? I mean, I brought them into this world, so now they got to put up with the dad jokes. That's all there is to it.
Well, how about we add Derek Dowsett, who just signed in, our former producer of County Seat Above Ground, and let's just throw him into the Lyons den, because he doesn't know he's going on camera. What do you think?
Doesn't have a clue. Let's go for it.
All right. So we have him in. Turn on your camera, Derek. We just put you on County Seat Underground. He'll be with us in a minute. He's still trying to figure out the audio buttons. I thought he knew this stuff. He was like
he's supposed to be the tech guru here.
Oh, I know. He's the king of this stuff. So
yeah.
Anyway,
Chad, I've taken on a new role, though. It's my responsibility to make people aware of the health benefit of dried raisins. Yeah, it's just a raisin awareness campaign.
Oh, really?
Sorry.
All right. Well, he's got his audio up. Now we just got to get him to turn it off and turn on his camera.
Had to throw a dad joke in there while we were waiting for.
I got raisin awareness. I get it. Did you just think that one up, Bushman?
No. Actually, Coda told me that one a few minutes ago, to be honest with you. I got to give him credit.
So you're raising him up properly. Is that it?
Yeah, I told him the other day that he's not allowed to tell dad jokes, though, because he's not a dad, and that he's nothing more than a faux pas.
I think I saw that one.
And then one of my friends chimed in and said, he's 17. Be grateful he's not a dad. And I was like, that's a really good point.
Oh, it is. It is. I look at my daughters right now. It's delightful as I got paintings of them right here that you just behind you all when they were 4. Because they grow up and they kind of get minds of their own, and neither one of them would probably agree with anything that we talk about on the county.
I can relate to that, Chad.
But you still got to love them.
That's right.
You still got to love them. So
you didn't warn Derek. He doesn't want to turn his camera on because he must be like hanging out in the garage or something.
He's got a
guys at least hear me.
I can hear you. Yes.
Okay.
All right.
I'm not sure why the camera's not turning on. Oh, let's see. start. We got virtual camera.
Did you warn him that we're actually filming an episode? Like,
No,
oh, okay.
I told him I needed to get one this week.
Oh, you're doing an episode?
Oh yeah, you're in it.
Oh,
Didn't you get the disclaimer papers or anything?
no, I didn't get any of that.
He's in his pajamas, Chad.
Yeah, I almost am, but let's see here.
I'm going to ask you again to start your video, see if that makes a magical difference.
I doubt it. I can't see it on my let's see, full screen.
Well, I tell you what, Derek, you work on it. We'll bring you
like it's all working. I mean, everything looks good. I can just get out of here.
Stick around.
I'm not going to help anything.
We're going to talk about CIB. That's going to be our topic tonight.
Well,
that's a
okay.
subject.
I don't know what I'm going to add to that.
Well, okay. You can send us comments. How's that?
Send you comments.
Yeah, you can put the little bubbles up on the screen.
Black Magic Design.
Raise your hand if you want to say something. Anyway, we're going to continue on with it. Folks, I don't know if you're fully aware of exactly what's going on, but a lot of the infrastructure of rural Utah is built around CIB. They have low interest, no interest loans. They have grants. This has been a large pool of money that has really built or kept rural Utah updated over the last, 3 decades, Darren?
Yes, at least. Yep.
And what people aren't aware of is with the change in this administration, in no other administration in Washington have they ever just shut off the spigot. I mean, they've challenged leases, they've slowed them down, they've made them more difficult to get. But in the energy producing sector, where we get those royalties, and the state gets 50% of the federal severance royalties, and they pass that out through the CIB to counties that, particularly rural counties that need help. What is the state of the fund right now, Darren?
So it's in trouble, Chad. And just to back up, so to clarify, where the CIB money comes from is from mineral lease royalties and oil extraction royalties. And so with the administration basically declaring war on extraction of any sort, right? Whether it's minerals or oil or natural gas or whatever.
Gravel.
Yeah. So anything that's coming off of public lands, basically they've declared war on that. And the reality of it is any of the exploration work that's being done right now and the development work that's being done has all moved to private lands. And so in the state of Utah in particular, there's no new oil wells being developed on public lands, just because the administration basically halted all leasing on public lands. Well, what happened is that shut the spigot off, and I don't think most of our constituents understand what that spigot provides, right? And I don't think they understand how it impacts their communities. But there's a very good reason that rural Utah doesn't look like a third world country. And that's because there's access to funding to build things like firehouses and community centers and water systems and paved streets and drainage systems and buy fire trucks and buy ambulances and, do things that they don't do in third world countries where they don't have the access to funding, right? And, you go back through the minutes of the CIB board meetings, and we're funding bridges, and we're funding all sorts of scenarios that small rural counties would not be able to fund: sewer systems and water treatment systems, and also recreational opportunities. There's the occasional splash pad that gets funded, or a fairground upgrade that gets funded, but critical infrastructure like ambulances and fire trucks are a big component of what goes through the CIB in either grants or loans. Just recently we worked on a program through the Central Utah Counseling Center where we went to the CIB to build an additional, counseling center for mental health and for that side of our business, where we provide clinical services and we also provide, residential treatment for people that, that can't exist on their own temporarily or, kind of semi-long term. So there's no permanent source of funding for that type of stuff. So the CIB comes in, they step in to help with that, right? We had a bridge in Paiute County that was condemned by UDOT. And so, where do we come up with the money to do that?
Well,
To rebuild the bridge?
I think that's an interesting point though, because people will just watch this at home and they'll go, well, if UDOT condemns a bridge, they're going to build a new one. And that's
It don't work that way, folks. UDOT will inspect a bridge, but if it's a county bridge on a county road, that's county responsibility. If it's a city bridge on a city road, it's a city responsibility, right? So that money has to come from somewhere. It doesn't just come out of the UDOT coffers. There are things that UDOT will help with, but for the most part, those responsibilities reside with the local governments, right? And there's not a lot of places to turn for that funding. And so when you have something out of the ordinary that you're not, budgeted on an annualized basis to provide those services, you have to go to a source like the CIB, right? And the CIB is in trouble. The last CIB board meeting started out with Candace, who administers the program, basically saying that at the current state of funding and the requests that they received, if they were to grant all of the requests that had been submitted to the CIB, that they would not have the money to fund the commitments that they already made in the prior meeting. So that's how the meeting started, Chad. And so people don't realize, it's all fine to sit here and say, oh, let's go to renewable energy. Let's go to, electric cars. Let's go to windmills and solar panels. And all of that's great. But at some point, we have to figure out how we are going to provide these expenditure or provide for these expenditures that right now come from mineral lease and extraction royalties.
So I guess that creates the question, what would rural Utah look like if this funding dried up? I mean, what would happen to Marysville? What would happen to Junction? What would happen to Kingston if this funding dried up in your county?
Well, the best way I can tell you what would happen, Chad, is if I just start naming things that have been that have gone to the CIB. And it gets to be a really long list really quick, right? So Marysville recently built a new community center. Marysville recently did a bunch of draining and drainage issues and rerouted a roadway. And they had roads that were to the point of, you turn it back to dirt or you repave it. And, for a little town the size of Marysville, there's not the money available, in Marysville's budget to repave, right? They can chip seal and maintain, but when it comes down to ripping asphalt out and laying new asphalt, they just don't have the budgets for that, right? And then you go to, Junction, our courthouse is a CIB loan. We built a new search and rescue sheriff's EMS building there with CIB funding. The firehouse in Junction was done with CIB funding. Back to Marysville, the ambulance that sits in the shed here is CIB funding. The fire truck that sits in the shed with it is CIB funding. When you go to the firehouse in Junction, they've got equipment that came from CIB. Circleville has a new community center and a clinic that came from CIB funding. A fire truck that came through CIB funding. They again went through a city drainage process and, correcting city drainage due to flooding and that sort of thing. Again, CIB funding, right? Kingston was in their old townhouse in Kingston, was built in 1900 or something like that, and wouldn't pass any, significant state codes for, seismic or anything else. So they just went through a remodel process there. Again, CIB. We've got a bridge at Otter Creek that was just replaced with CIB. So you can see the list goes on and on and on. And by the way, these are just off the top of my head things that I know of. And I know prior to me being a commissioner, the CIB was pumping money into these communities. And, counties and cities, they borrow this money from the CIB and they pay interest on it, and it goes back into the fund. And thank goodness the fund has done that over the years. So they actually have money coming back in other than from mineral lease royalties, or we'd be in a world of hurt. I'm still of the opinion that we need a long-term look at how we do this. We're familiar with the Nebraska Community Foundation, where they've established a statewide foundation scenario where they invest the profits from the investments back into their communities, but they're always working to build the endowment, right? And if we had been taking the seed corn from the CIB and investing it all these years, we would have a $1 billion, trust fund that would be throwing off 7 to 10% annually that could be invested. But we're not in that situation. And so it's time to start thinking strategically and figuring it out. It was time 10 years ago, and it's certainly time now to figure this out, because these little communities would be in big trouble if it wasn't for CIB.
Well, and that's the thing that I don't think people think about, is you say these little communities would be in big trouble. But the answer to that is if you can't sustain life in a rural town, it goes away. And then when people on the Wasatch Front want to come through, they want to go to Bryce Canyon. How are they going to do that if there's nothing between Provo and Bryce Canyon? Because literally there could be nothing.
Yeah, and when I say little communities, Richfield isn't exactly little, not like Marysville or Junction, certainly. And they just found themselves in a real pinch with a sewer system, right? Mm-hmm. A sewer system that's not EPA compliant, that has serious technical problems, and not able to handle the capacity that they need to handle. And so it's a multi-million-dollar project, and where do they get the money, right? And so again, CIB steps in and loans them some money at a relatively low interest, right? So it changes communities immensely to have the ability to go somewhere for funding.
Okay, so what do you do? I mean, do you know the numbers? Is it 10% of what it used to be? Is it headed there? Is it 20%? How big is this 1 year of no new leases had an impact?
You don't want to have me throw out the numbers, Chad, because I sure as heck somebody will correct me on it. But I'll just tell you off the top of my head, I think we used to be $50 to $70 million a year, and we're looking at $14 million this year.
So it's more than half in 1 year.
Oh yeah, this is a real world of hurt. And the other thing that people ought to realize is that we're talking about CIB, but these mineral lease royalties, they get split up and go a lot of different directions when they come back to the state of Utah. So, the way that process works is we collect them all, we send them to the federal government, and we're supposed to split them. Recently, they decided that they needed to take administration fees off the top. So it used to be we split them 50-50 with the federal government. Now it's more like 48-52, because they want their money plus the cost of managing the money. And so, roughly 48% of it comes back to the state, and then it gets split up in a variety of ways. And that's a very long, complex formula we don't want to talk about. But in my county, a lot of that money goes back into my special service district, right? So the mineral lease funds go back into my special service district, which has the responsibility for a whole bunch of things in Paiute County, that the county doesn't fund with property taxes and sales tax and transient room tax and other things, right? Primarily road based, but we're in the same pain in our special service district, and that's all across the state, right? Anybody that was receiving mineral royalties, they're in a world of hurt. And specifically, if you were used to getting extremely large payments and you built your county expenditures around that, let's just say the basin, right? Where the basin, and of course, Carbon County felt this before the war on coal, right? So Carbon County used to have a very nice cash flow off mineral royalties, and then we declared war on coal and really hurt the coal industry, and we consequently really hurt Carbon and Emery and those counties that were coal producing counties. Now we're doing the same thing to the extraction counties that are oil and gas.
So what do you think? I mean, we've got another 3 years and 4 months until any of this changes. So what are we going to do?
Well, we've got to get very strategic about how we're spending the money we've got, right? And we've put together a conversation that's going to happen at the upcoming Utah Association of Counties conference in Midway, specifically to talk about this CIB issue and the whole conversation about building some sort of an ongoing endowment or something that functions differently and maybe better than the CIB does.
Yeah, but what worries me about that, and I think you're right. In the long run, that's good. But in the short run, that means if you've got it's like Sitla. It's the same sort of thing. It's taken them years to build up that endowment, and they didn't do much until they started getting that big return, and they could only live off the return. It's not going to be 10%, it's going to be 5%.
Yeah, it's going to take years to build something, Chad. It literally will take years and years to build endowment, but when's a better time to start than now? Right.
Well, but I mean, that seriously though, I sit here and think about it, and it's like, does that mean Hanksville goes away? I mean, just literally becomes a ghost town? Does that mean Cannonville becomes a ghost town? Does that mean that Henryville is toast? Does that wash up Kingston? Does that have, I mean, your county is one of the smallest counties in the state. You and Daggett County are the two Class 6 counties. And there are a couple of others that should be Class 6, but just by definition, they're not quite there. So by the time you get that endowment filled up, you guys, you might all be living somewhere else.
Well, and the thing about it is, Chad, is it's the maintenance of infrastructure that's already been invested in that's the scary thing, right? So the CIB's invested millions and millions and millions across Utah, right? And in a lot of cases, that's got to be upgraded or maintained or rebuilt or new roofs or whatever corrections need to be done. It happens with streets, it happens with sewage systems, it happens with fairgrounds, it happens with search and rescue buildings, and usually CIB is who you go to do that as well. So the unfortunate part is that I fear there'll be vast expanses of infrastructure that's already been built that won't be effectively maintained, right, or managed going forward. So I wish I knew an answer. I think one of the things that we really have to look at is, the CIB has been this cool little fund that there was always money available to borrow or in some cases get grants from, and nobody really talked about where it came from. It was almost like we were afraid to admit that it came from oil extraction or coal extraction, right, or uranium extraction. And I don't think we should be afraid of that at all. We should be proud of the fact that we have created a state that doesn't look like a third world country because we have a CIB, and we've been able to use those royalties to build infrastructure and buy ambulances and buy fire trucks. I think we should be dang proud of that, Chad. And it's almost like we're afraid to admit it. And, we've got some groups in the state, you probably read the article just recently. There was an article, I think it appeared in the Deseret News about, they called it the Great Oil Slick or something. And, they were going after the CIB because the CIB was investing in infrastructure that would further and would improve and promote effective transportation of extractive products, right? And oil in particular. And so, we actually have special interest groups that are attacking this fund. And I don't think that people in Utah realize that that special interest group is attacking the exact fund that bought the ambulance that sits in their ambulance shed, right? That bought the fire trucks that's sitting in their fire truck, in their firehouse, or maybe bought the firehouse or the community center that they just had their kids' wedding at, right? I mean, there's any number of things that the CIB has done, and yet we've got these special interest groups that are also gung ho on this, renewable energy concept, and that the taboo of oil and gas. I don't think that the general public realizes how screwed they'd be if we didn't have that revenue coming back to them.
So is there a way that you can actually restructure how your a severance tax for renewable energy? Is there a possibility that there still could be some revenue that comes off that share of kilowatts produced by a solar farm or by a wind farm? Or I mean, is that part of our future?
Well, we definitely have to figure that out. I'm hoping that lawmakers will continue to watch the county seat underground and listen to this conversation, because frankly, our lawmakers need to be looking at that, right? If we're going to transfer everything over to solar and wind, right, then how are you going to fund something like the CIB, right? I mean, there's got to be some give and take. We're going to go to, it's the same conversation that we have about roads. How have we paid for roads all these years in the state of Utah? Well, it's been off a fuels tax, right? Well, so now we have a particular mode of transportation that doesn't pay an ounce of fuels tax. Well, we better get our arms around that and figure that out, right?
So how much given what's happening, how much did the CIB spend on stuff last year? Is there an aggregate number that you're even close on?
So that information is available on the CIB's website. I couldn't tell you, Chad, but it's probably, $100 million, because you got to keep in mind that they're spending the return off of the payments as well that come in, or they're loaning it, right? So the money that's coming back in from the lendees is turned around and it's being lent out again or granted out again, right? As well as the money that's coming from the mineral lease and extractive industries.
So,
but it's a lot of cash. Let's just put it that way.
Well, and so if you dropped down to 5% of royalty extraction just based on what they're doing, and I don't see with the new nominee for BLM that it's going to even approach getting better. But if it dropped to from 95 or 100 million to 5 million, what would the legislature do when rural Utah got together and came up there and said, you got to come up with $95 million?
Well, and I don't know the answer to that, but I'll also tell you, Chad, I think we have lawmakers that don't even understand this fund, right? I'm not trying to offend any lawmakers, but when you talk about CIB with certain lawmakers, they don't even know what it's about. They don't understand what it does for the state, right? And so, we've got to educate them, right? That's the value of the county seat in my book, because there are so many of these issues. This is a prime example of one where, we as local governance understand the impact of these things to us, but at the state level, it's there's so many other things, and there's so many other special interests all up there with their handout that, you know, a lot of cases, you know, we get these really high image conversations going on during the legislative session, and they control the whole narrative of what's going on during the session, right?
Mhm.
Meanwhile, there's something uber critical like this CIB conversation that you know, it's back burner conversation, or maybe not even, you know, talked about because we're busy talking about conversion therapy, right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, in a lot of cases, it's the off session where we have to do the education with lawmakers so that they understand the impacts, this sort of thing. They don't have an answer either, Chad. They don't have $95 million sitting around to backfill this, right? So
Well,
I
yeah,
totally get where the lawmakers are coming from. They don't have a solution to this in their back pocket.
okay, well, you know, something needs to happen. So um,
I do have to say that if the BLM, the proposed nominee for BLM director, as you stated, gets in, this will probably be the least of our worries with the BLM, with public lands. But it's definitely going to have an impact.
So given her past, if Stone Manny actually gets the nod and somehow gets past Senate confirmation, what do you think is going to be the immediate result of it? I mean, what do you think will happen day one? Here's a gal, as we talked about on the county seat broadcast, who worked for an eco-terrorist organization and did a lot of work for them, and has never really accounted for or recounted it or acknowledged it. But the evidence is there in hard print, and she has made a few moves across her tenure and career that would make things really difficult. You know, what do you think? What do you think that looks like?
Well, you know, the reality is she's a rabid environmentalist and has a whole entire lifetime of, you know, impacts and projects that she's worked on. You know, not to mention the eco-terrorism involvement that she's been in. At bare minimum, Chad, even if she can't get anything, you know, totally locked down in an environmental move, she'll definitely get lots and lots and lots of Bureau of Land Management activities, whether it's oil extraction, uranium extraction, or you know, any other number of things tied up in court for the next 10 or 15 years, right? So she could make enough moves and make enough decisions that, you know, we're going to be in a mess literally for the next 10 or 15 years trying to clean up what she did, right? And you know, how long have we been dealing with the waters of the US, right? And that court case started 15 years ago, right? And it's had 7 different iterations now, and we thought we had it all straightened around, and now here we are in a new administration who, you know, decides to, you know, throw the baby out with the bathwater. And so, you know, I totally perceive whether she can actually stop extraction or stop multiple use on public lands permanently, she will definitely create an absolute nightmare of litigation that will go on for years, that will cost counties and states across the nation millions, if not billions of dollars in litigation.
So Derek, you're kind of our voice of moderation, having been the producer and kept the reins in on me. You were there when we taped with Senator Lee. And I asked him point blank, I said, calling her an eco-terrorist is a pretty bold statement. What did you come away with from that? Because you probably saw it a little differently than I did. Whoop. I don't hear you. And I did hear you.
No voice.
He's lost his voice.
You have to read lips.
Here we go. That should be me. Hello?
We can
There
hear
you go.
Okay, there we go. Well, yeah, my issue with how we put that together is, I really don't know this person at all. It sounds very bad, but we kept coming back to the same, conclusion. We don't want an eco-terrorist to head the BLM. And we built this case that, okay, she's an eco-terrorist. I agree that with her background, there's other people that probably are a better fit. And that's the hard part, is how did she get where she got, why did the president decide, okay, this is the person to choose?
It's called the sickening game of politics.
Well, and so, looking at this during the Trump administration, you would see the different appointees that Trump would bring, and then the environmental groups would say, oh, this person's in the pocket of oil and gas and this and that. And so is it more of the same of, okay, our team won, and so we're going to put our people in? And I think that's the problem. We keep the larger problem where we keep flip-flopping back and forth is it's win at any cost. We've gotten away from, okay, here's what we really need. We need local solutions. We need stuff to get done. We need to move forward. It's just, okay, do we have a D or an R in office right now? Is looking in, it's really frustrating, I guess.
You're spot on, Derek. If you talk with these administrators inside the agencies, the whipsaw component, of the boomerang effect with every new administration that comes along, we want to talk about frustrated people. It's their own personnel that is just incredibly frustrated, right? Beyond belief. And stuff that they spent 3 years working on in the Trump administration has now been completely flipped upside down, and we're going to do this all over again, right? And it's like, and by the way, we want a different outcome. You can go do all the research you want, you can do all the use studies you want, you can do all the environmental, ecological studies that you want, but we want a different outcome. And so, imagine being an administrator in that scenario.
Yeah, absolutely. It's frustrating. Now, I mean, looking at where it could go, in 2014, 2015, things on public lands were getting out of hand. I was involved in two different stories, one down at Bundyville, and then even Recapture Canyon, where, people are just tired of it. And so I'm afraid that if we can't rebuild the trust, and I think we've been going in the right direction. I've never seen the Bureau of Land Management so easy to work with in our program. And seeing that the people, and a lot of these people you're talking about, they're getting whipped back and forth saying, hey, this is great, let's work with you. And having an opportunity to start building that trust, building that rapport, so we can find real solutions and not just, okay, I'm going to get whatever I can done during this president so we can, move our agenda forward. I look specifically at the wild horse issue that we just covered. There's a lot of trust building that needs to be rebuilt, and I think the right people are in place right now to start that. So if we make a bunch of changes there, or make a bunch of changes on roads, or all of these other issues that are going on out there, and I think that's the thing that a regular person would never imagine, right? You're driving through Utah, and that these changes are huge here in Utah. And if they're going to continue whipping back and forth, no wonder, on either side of the issue, no wonder people are mad.
We went through, our involvement with the BLM grazing, the new grazing plan that they were developing, right? And the grazing standards. And we became a partner in that. And, a cooperating agency, Paiute County joined as a cooperating agency. And, this thing was 75-80% of the way done when we changed administration. And we changed administration, and this has come to a screeching halt, right? And now we're reeling in everything that was done and decided upon, and all of the proposals that were put forth, and all of the agreements that had been made. All of those have been backtracked now. And we're sitting here as a cooperating agency not even knowing if there's a activity going on at this point in time. It's that bad. And I know that the administration, or the administrators in the agencies, are just incredibly frustrated with that, top down, halt on progress.
Well, and I can only imagine for elected officials, I mean, it's almost, you have to be there some amount of time. If I was a new county commissioner stepping in, it took me probably 8 years to get, just so I could understand what was going on with the show. And I had another prior, probably 5 or 6 just with the recreation side, that, okay, I kind of get what's going on. But I bet it drives you guys nuts.
Well, and that's interesting you bring that up, because Leland Pollock and I talked about this just recently, is the folks who didn't live through the Obama administration as a county commissioner, they don't understand what it was like, right? And you remember you were filming shows during that realm, but I'm 9 years as a commissioner, and I'm still learning every day how this stuff works, and then watching the whipsaw that's going on, and basically the decision making that's occurring in a vacuum without regard to the impacts. And this CIB thing's a prime example of, I know that people upstream have no idea how heavily they could impact little communities with this decision that came out of the administration on the first day that they were in office, right? The very first day they were in office. And I can guarantee you the Biden administration had no idea that they were going to be impacting the ability of small communities to buy ambulances and fire trucks. And I'm not sure that state legislators know either.
Oh yeah, well, and I guess, where do you start? I mean, commissioners through Utah Association of Counties, through NACO, you have that sounding board, but are they talking to you like the previous administration, or how do you get, when somebody new steps in and decides, okay, I'm going to change everything, for whatever reason, how do you get back up to speed?
Well, it's interesting you say that, because the previous administration had regular calls with elected officials all across the nation, and invited us to DC. We actually went to the White House several times and met with them, met with the secretaries, met with their staffs. They had an incredible outreach to local government, and they were seeking solutions from us, right? They weren't telling us what the solutions were going to be. It wasn't a top-down design. It was, hey, tell us how we can improve this for you. And that unfortunately has changed entirely. Haven't had but a couple of those conference calls, and most of them were, shall I say, political in nature to build support for massive spending bills that they were trying to push through. So it's unfortunate.
So I have a question that brings this out, and I guess that question really is, if we've got, you come into an administration where you're the guy in favor, and you were saying, yeah, they finally reached out to us and they started talking to us. Is there another group that during that time said they're not talking to us anymore? Or do you think that the more conservative administrations really did have an open ear to all the groups involved? Or was it just trading one side for another?
I don't know the answer to that, Chad. I will tell you, in the 8 years of the Obama administration, and I wasn't there for all of it, but not one time was I aware of a conference call with county commissioners, city council people, state legislators during the whole entire time.
Yeah, you had a hard time even getting an audience with the governor, even though he said, Governor Huntsman said he talked to every one of the counties. Apparently, that was just in his imagination, because we checked. Right.
And so it was, there was no communication going on with local government, which I tend to believe that there was certain special interest groups that were getting the ear, right? And I would probably say during the Trump administration, those same special interest groups probably weren't getting much of an ear. But I think the thing that was really important was the representatives of the people, the truly elected representatives of the people, the city councilmen, the county commissioners, the precinct judges, different states call county commissioners different things. At the end of the day, those state legislators and senators and representatives, as well as the low level, local government people, were being listened to. Doug Hulsher, people don't really realize, but they built an organization to communicate with local government that rivals anything in history, and it was incredibly effective. And unfortunately, it's dead now. That organization, the outreach organization that they built in the White House, to my knowledge, doesn't exist. If it does, it exists only for a select few special interest groups. So
I'm going to ask the really important questions. The smartest people in the room have gone to bed. Derek, what are your kids' takes on all of this?
I don't know that they have sat still enough to listen to me rant and rave about it. But it is very hard to sit and watch the federal government spend money that, maybe my kids will be paying back if it's not their kids. It's I guess as I sit here, you just sit and wonder, is all this really happening? And then what the heck do you do, right?
So if Aspen were going to give advice to us on how to solve our problem, what would she say?
I don't know, Chad. All that comes to my mind is when we ask her what's going on, she says nothing. And I don't think that's the solution. We got to see that if you take more than you give, at some point you're going to be just out.
But how do we change that with the next generation? And that's going to be my parting shot for tonight. How do we change that with the young people that are coming up through the ranks? I mean, you're younger.
Yeah, I'm younger, but you know that I'm not as tenacious as a Commissioner Bushman to keep doing the hard things. I mean, I would, if I ever was made the mistake of running for office, it would be a 4-year commitment. I'm not getting into something longer than that because of family. I mean, I even look at the Governor Cox and what he's done through his career. How on earth do you manage all the things that you need to on a daily basis? I mean, I'm struggling just getting into the new routine of, okay, we got to get the kid to kindergarten, and then we got to run into preschool, and then we have a couple hours, and then we got to turn around and run the other direction. I mean, I think so many people are busy being busy, or maybe it's just me, that when we come home, we don't want to dig into a lot of this stuff and go, well, what are these guys doing? We just look at it and go, well, what the hell are these idiots doing? Why are they doing that? But we don't make that next step. I guess getting the next generation to really see that, yeah, things are not going to keep being as easy as they were, you know, when I was growing up. It's there has you got to put something in.
So I'm going to leave you with a parting thought for tonight. And this has been something that Derek, you and I have talked about. And this is something I think, Darren, that you and I have talked about. As I have watched 10 years of county seat, I have noticed a change. And I have noticed a change that the local leaders, when I first started doing the show, when we first talked about the concept of doing a dialogue to bring these issues up in the public, there were leaders. There were guys that were out there that knew what had to be done, and they knew it was unpopular, but they did it anyway. You know, like Del Lefevre, man, he lived in Boulder, of all places. The scorn that man had to go through just to get from Escalante to his house was a big challenge. You know, and you got Mark Habishaw, our local scofflaw that was mocked by every news agency, some of them even national, because he said, no, these are our roads and we're going to put our signs up. And you know, what has happened is these guys have retired, and some of them have died, and some of them didn't get reelected. It seems to me that there is a new class of local government leader that is more interested in ruling and getting reelected and having a rulership than there is in leading. And I think this is something that has troubled me the last 4 or 5 years. You know, Derek, as a producer of the show, would pull his hair out just trying to get anybody to even talk about stuff he knew they needed to talk about, and they wouldn't do it. So, you know, what do we do?
You know, Chad, it's interesting you say that. I've watched it myself, right? In the 9 years, there was a very aggressive group of county commissioners when I first got into office, and I was like, hey, this is awesome. We're going to be able to get some stuff done, right? And one of the things that I've noticed is that the media no longer attacks the issue. They attack the person, right? They go after the messenger. And I think what's happened is you've ended up with people going kind of like Derek said, you know, I don't think I want to dig into that, and I don't want to commit that amount of time, and I don't want to deal with that type of issue, you know. And I've been a little bit politically incorrect in the past when I have run into, you know, kids younger than Derek, but who said, well, I don't do politics. I don't do politics. I'm like, that's okay. Politics does you, right? And it's the real deal. But Paul Cousins shared a quote with me, and I'm not, me sharing a religious quote doesn't probably come natural, but he shared a quote from Elder Neil Maxwell with me, which I think is so fitting for where we are today. And it really has hit me. He says, Satan need not get everyone to be like Cain or Judas. He need only to be able to get able men to see themselves as sophisticated neutrals. And we've done this, right? We have lots of sophisticated neutrals, and heaven forbid that you're brash, Mark Habishaw, right? And or Dale Lefevre, who just said it like it was, right? We lost a great one out of the legislature when Mike Noel left. But one thing about it, when Mike Noel spoke, he spoke the truth, right? And he just spoke it bluntly. And, of course, the newspaper loved to just attack certain newspaper in particular.
He was their poster child. This is
right.
true.
And so, and I've been on that end of that stick a few times, right? And it's not fun, right? It really isn't fun. You soon realize that there's life after that, but we can't all sit around and be sophisticated neutrals. It's just not going to happen. There's going to be hard conversations, and there's going to be hard decisions to be made. And somebody's got to be aggressive, and we've got to be aggressive about protecting these things that we're talking about, just like we started this conversation with. And we need to be fighting these issues tooth and nail.
Great, guys. Thank you so much for participating in this tonight. This is the first one. For those of you who tuned in to listen to this, know that we're going to continue to have these kinds of conversations, and we do not want to put on any boxing gloves. So if somebody needs to be called out, we need to call them out with the same spirit of purpose that Mike Noel used to do. To me, the epitome of watching local government was the night that SUA had a rally at the state capitol. It was about 7 p.m. at night. And Mike Noel walked right through their protest crowd and stood right in the front row and started singing "This Land is Your Land, This Land is My Land" right along with it. And then he went up to speak to him, and they shut the mic off. And even some of those people that didn't want to hear him said, no, let him speak. That guy walked right into the Lyons den because he knew what he believed in, and he knew that what he was standing for from his perspective was right. And he was not afraid to have that conversation with a blatantly hostile crowd. That was one of the most, to me, that was right in the same category as that guy in China that walked up and stood in front of that tank. It was remarkable to see. So let's end this on a good note. Darren, we need a dad joke before we sign off for tonight.
My favorite, Chad, when a dad joke reaches the elevation of being considered a dad joke, right?
No.
You don't know? Derek?
I do, but I don't want to ruin your delivery.
It becomes apparent.
With that, thank you for tuning in. Look for this every week. There are 2 more episodes of The County Seat to be broadcast on Channel 4. They will both be with William Perry Pendley, who was President Trump's nominee to head the BLM. And they will be good conversations that will I think you will find them surprising to tune into. And we will be back to give you commentary on that and carry on forward. So this is a regular occurrence. Look for it. The County Seat Underground. Thank you guys for participating. Derek, you're an awfully good sport. That's all I got to say.
Thanks, Chad. Next time, let me know what you're throwing me into.
Yeah, thanks, Derek.
No, Derek, if we gave you advance notice, You wouldn't have shown
Then
up.
I'd know what I was talking about.
You wouldn't have shown up. Anyway,
That's a possibility too.
from all of us here, good night to you all, or good day to you all, whatever time of the day it is you're watching. We'll see you next week.
Good night.